and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2, and you've been up to some bad things again. This week's colourful collection includes a hair-raising harvest of hay, some bedtime boxing, an eye-popping peep show, and a life-enhancing labour of love. Thank you. But who will you forgive? Here it all comes. Maggie tells tonight's rather interesting, so slightly different actually. Saintly Simon and the Parochial Posse. It has been 47 years since my last confession, i.e. never. However, spurred on by your psycho confession, this was the woman who thought it would be hilarious to reenact the shower sequence from Psycho.
Hilarious, yeah.
Thus scaring her husband just a little bit. Anyway, having heard your psycho confession, I realise I must come clean about my own misdemeanour, which happened really rather recently. I should say, like many others, I don't like spiders. I'm not totally phobic. I can cope with a tiddler. So when I opened the airing cupboard the other day to get out a towel and saw a small money spider on the floor of the cupboard, I was, well, it's okay, live and let live. I thought I'd just leave it alone. I can cope with that. Feeling a bit like St. Francis of Assisi, I went just because she left it alone. I went to close the cupboard, and it was then that I saw the most enormous spider in the world on the towel that I was holding. It was the kind with knees. I got it. I think I recognised it from one of those wildlife shows. The words giant huntsman spider came to mind, I'm not sure why. It had green, unblinking, malevolent eyes, brown, patterned legs, hairy too. As I stared in horror at it, it arched its back. I swear it really was about to pounce. I was rooted to the spot in blind panic and at first tried to blow it away, like you do. But such was my abject terror that all I could manage was a feeble which obviously had no impact at all. It merely ruffled a few of its hairs in my feeble breeze. So then I tried that flicky thing, that flicky thing. I couldn't bring myself to actually touch it with my fingers. So I sort of tried to flick it off the towel with the back of my hand. Still didn't move. I found myself counting its legs. I got to 7. That couldn't be right. Maybe one had fallen off. Anyway, it was then that my world went a bit weird. I heard quite a loud yelp quite close to my ear, which didn't really make any sense, but gradually things became clearer. I had, in fact, been fast asleep. The reason I couldn't blow the spider away was that he was, in actual fact, an 11-stone husband and was and was asleep next to me. I know it all sounds a bit Dallas, but the spider, airing cupboard and all that had been the dream. Unfortunately, when I couldn't blow the spider away, that flicky thing was in fact a huge punch on my husband's nose at 2 o'clock in the morning. He was understandably disgruntled. At the time, I managed to... Sorry, I thought you were a spider. Next morning, my husband, who I'm actually quite fond of, was all blooded nose and puppy dog eyes, though in retrospect that could have been just eyes watering. He said, "You punched me in the face last night." He showed me his blood-stained pillowcase. It was like a crime scene. I was, of course, appropriately repentant. However, I must confess that repentance while laughing until you need a wee may not be true repentance. So for this, I need your forgiveness. Not for punching my husband in the face. I was asleep and not in control of my faculties, you understand. I'm not sure that's quite a decent defence anyway. But for laughing like a horse every time I remember it, very bad form indeed. I hope you'll find it in your hearts to forgive me. But if not, could you pass this on to Steve Wright's Dream Guru, as I feel dream analysis may be necessary to prevent further somnolent harm to my undeserving husband. Wow, that sounds like one heck of a punch that he got halfway through the night just because Maggie was dreaming of a big old spider. Sister Rebecca?
I can't believe he had a bloody nose after that. That's, that is quite a punch. Thing is, I mean, we all do that to our other halves.
What, punch them in the face?
Matt's nodding. No, I'm always slapping my husband. I mean, not intentionally. Or actually, I have this thing, because our 3-year-old comes into our bed most nights and wakes us up and everything, and I always have to feel to see who's next to me in the bed, and I always wake my husband up.
Before you punch them?
No, see who it is, and I end up poking my husband in the eye and that kind of thing, see if it's the 3-year-old or him. Anyway, so I think it's quite common. I do think it's going a bit far, but as she said, she was asleep, so she can't be accountable for her actions.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're completely forgiven.
It's forgiveness for laughing like a drain. I think that's the thing.
Well, yes, I was poked. I've been poked in the eye a number of times. Yes, we all do it. Well, yes. most of us do it, I think, a lot.
What, poke people in the eye and slap
well,
them in the
you know,
face?
you're
Sorry,
having
I
a
was
dream
dreaming.
and you're thinking, I'm being attacked by whatever, and therefore I need to lash out, and oh, sorry, was that you? But really, is what she, as you say, she's seeking forgiveness for laughing like a drain every time she brings it up. And to me, that doesn't sound like she's particularly sorry that she did it.
It's funny, isn't it?
So I'm unfortunately the rules are you've got to be sorry, and so she's not forgiven. But you know what? Those in glass houses, we've all done it. So actually forgiven for that because
After
we've
all.
all done it. Yeah.
This is from Mike, and he sends in tonight's drive time confession. Send yours, please. confessions@bbc.co.uk. That sounded like a desperate appeal. That wasn't how it was supposed to come over. Mike has actually named his own confession Hay Rage for reasons that you're about to find out. We go back to the summer of 1993. At the time, Father Simon, I was 30, a hard-working farmer and keen to expand the business. This entailed taking on work few others actually wanted. Making and carting about 15,000 small bales of hay to supply local stables was one of those jobs. Moving small bales is hard physical work, often in extremely hot weather and working late into the night, especially if storms are expected. On Hay Rage Day, my 3 mid-20s employees and I were working hard out in the fields. The field we were in lay behind and backed onto the beer garden of a local pub. As all good farmers should, we were making hay while the sun shone. The general public, however, on this scorching Saturday afternoon, were enjoying all the countryside had to offer. The pub, of course, was doing a roaring trade. We were envious. Our 2 tractors and trailers were almost level with the entrance to the pub car park when a BMW convertible, driven by a flash chap travelling in the opposite direction, veered sharply across the road at considerable speed. He passed just in front of the tractor, entering the car park and creating a cloud of dust along with much crunching of gravel. Now, the usual response from the tractor driver to this type of behaviour would have involved the flashing of lights, honking of horns and self-explanatory hand gestures. However, none of this happened as we were fully occupied admiring his extremely attractive female passenger, presumably his girlfriend. For the purpose of narrating this story, I have named the couple in the convertible. The flash young man will be Tom, as in Cruise. His dress code came straight from Top Gun. The extremely attractive girlfriend shall be Kirsty, as I have yet to meet an ugly Kirsty. Interesting. The time was now around 7 p.m. and we decided to clear the bales next to the pub first. Right. I was the first to spot Kirsty sitting alone at a table close to the fence separating the pub garden from the hay field. She was taking the opportunity to reserve a table while Tom fetched the drinks. Well, the tractor and trailer pulled up within easy chatting distance and Kirsty was engaged in conversation while we posed and flexed our muscles and displayed our bale stacking skills in an attempt to impress. Always wins them over. Kirsty made our day, chatting freely with us yokels and showing interest and knowledge about hay because she said she owned a horse.
Yeah, more than enough. More fully qualified.
Our chat-up attempts, I'm sure we were making progress, halted abruptly as soon as Tom approached with the drinks. Aviator shades pushed up into his perfectly coiffed hair, leather jacket hung on a shoulder, looking, I hate to say it, a pretty cool dude. All Kirsty's attention switched to Tom, much to our annoyance. Tom weighed up the situation in an instant and obviously didn't approve of our attempts to chat up Kirsty. Tom now engaged in a dangerous game, mocking the farm boys. He kept raising his pint of ice-cold lager, not man enough to drink bitter, to toast us and then running the glass across his forehead to emphasise quite how cool it was. This was close to causing a riot and I had to convince my employees that it was not acceptable to go and sort him out in the pub garden. 1.5 hours later, with 700 bales loaded and roped onto the trailers, it was time to head home. Pulling onto the road, heading back past the pub, the 2 tractors and trailers in convoy, we were expecting an uneventful journey back to the yard. The lead tractor was passing the entrance to the pub when, like a flash, the BMW convertible appeared. The car leapt onto the road. Tom had tried to get ahead of the tractor to give himself a clear run down the picturesque valley. He'd failed and was now sandwiched between 2 loads of hay. This was a big mistake. I happened to be in the second tractor, and just in front of me sat Tom and Kirsty in their shiny convertible. Both tractors were able to communicate via CB radio. A quick call to the tractor in front, telling him to stay slightly left, resulted in the hedge vigorously brushing the load and sending torrents of loose hay straight into the open BMW. There were few overtaking opportunities along the Valley Road, and all were blocked by the lead tractor mysteriously moving slightly to the right just at the right time. Tom and Kirsty were trapped. Pointless attempts to overtake were blocked. He tried dropping back to avoid the hay zone, but a little proactive driving on my part, coupled with a call to the lead tractor to slow up a bit, ensured a constant stream of hay raining down into the now not-so-shiny convertible. This lasted for 5 minutes before the trailers had to turn off into the main road. I had the final view of Tom and Kirsty and the not-so-shiny convertible before they sped away. Tom was a shade of puce, hay sticking to all exposed skin, clothes and hair. I'm sure he was aware that his hay treatment was an engineered situation, controlled by myself. There was nothing he could do. The lovely Kirsty was now not so glamorous. The shades had gone, the long blonde hair, now matted with hay, gave a Yeti-like appearance, and the tanned complexion had been replaced by a slightly red, blotchy and sweaty look caused by the exertion of flinging hay from the car. The convertible had suffered the most. After 5 miles of nearly constant hay storm, the car was actually full. Every nook and cranny was full of hay. This is when I realised that Tom was not quite as well-heeled as I had imagined. The top-of-the-range BMW would have been equipped with wall-to-wall leather, and hay would have slipped away easily. However, Tom's cheap cloth interior attracted hay like Velcro. It even clung to the vertical panels. Do I seek forgiveness for my hay rage on Tom? Definitely not. He deserved all he got. Best not to mess with farm boys on their own turf. The fragrant Kirsty, what can I say? Her only sin was Tom, a poor choice of boyfriend. I should like to apologise, though, for my actions and seek forgiveness. But this is what will have happened to the car. After a few months, after much valeting, the unfortunate Tom would be caught in a sudden rainstorm with the roof down. The multitude of tiny grass seeds in every nook and cranny, hidden in the carpets and cheap cloth interior, would then germinate. Future valeting may require a strimmer and not a hoover. But I would like to be forgiven for my assault on a very nice car whose only sin was being owned by Tom. Thank you very much indeed. This is Mike, now age 50 and still a farmer. But he had his own back. Don't take the mickey out of the farm boys. In his own words, what do you say, Rebecca?
That is very funny. Sweet revenge. In a way, part of me says it serves Tom right for being so annoying and, brushing his forehead with the cool pint.
Yes.
But then, he was jealous of the lovely and fragrant Kirsty, and wouldn't any man have behaved the same way? In fact, any man who didn't behave in that way would be remiss in some way. Don't you think? He was just defending Kirsty.
Yes.
And so, in a way, he had a right to behave like that. But also, Kirsty got hay all over her, and they liked Kirsty.
Yes.
So that was an unintended consequence. So I think, all in all, I'm not going to forgive you.
Let's see what the Dean of Deadliness makes.
I don't think I'm going to forgive either, actually. Mocking is something I know a bit about working on this programme. Mocking, from the gentleman next to me.
Hurry up, Stripey, come on.
And I feel sorry for Kirsty as well. I feel sorry for any other road users that were caught up in Ennis. So I'm not going to forgive, I'm afraid. It's not allowed.
Just because you've got an open top beam.
I might just happen to have it.
Yeah.
There you go. What do you say then?
The problem here for Tom is that it appears his only crime. I mean, wiping a glass against your forehead is hardly, provocation to mean that you can be covered in hay. It appears his only crime is driving a convertible, having a leather jacket, and drinking lager.
Yes.
And for those
not having leather seats.
And not having leather seats. And for those crimes alone, I think definitely forgiven. Because let's face it, none of us like people in convertible cars. Whenever they feature on Confessions, they're always filled with slurry, and we all go, yeah, had it coming, didn't they? Get a roof, you loser. So I am going to forgive, definitely, because he was driving the wrong kind of car and had a nice-looking girlfriend and drank lager.
Tonight comes from Nick. Nick, thank you very much indeed. My confession hails back to the class of 1977, Father Simon, an epic year at my photography college. In those days, the photography department was sharing a long building with the hairdressing department. I'm not mentioning the college specifically here, you might have noticed. The photographic studio was separated from the hairdressing department by a set of double doors. The trainee hairdressers were always barging into our space in order to press gang us into being models for their styling course. We usually obliged because it meant having a free haircut and the opportunity to meet some fit, aspiring stylists, says Nick, in a truly 70s kind of way.
Yeah.
Part of our course to becoming professional photographers involved working late in the studio to fulfill certain briefs handed out by our tutors. On this occasion, we had to design and create a piece of work of our choosing. I chose to design and photograph a piece of work for a fictitious horror book cover. My idea was to photograph a skull, which I had, and to superimpose in the eye socket a real eye. Being very resourceful in those days, I asked a fellow student who lived locally where the local abattoir was, so I could get some eyes. I maybe should have given a warning out before.
This is a real eye? Wow.
Yeah, from an abattoir.
I thought it was going to, well, obviously not Photoshop it, it's the 70s, isn't it?
Yes, that's right, exactly.
Yeah.
I explained my predicament to the abattoir man. No problem, exclaimed the voice at the other end of the phone. Just come round the back, knock on the door, and I'll bring you some bullseyes. Well, thanks, I said. I only need one. See you later. At the allotted time, I rapped on the door, which was instantly opened, and a large guy in a blood-stained apron said, "Are you Nick?" Because they talk like that in abattoirs. I nodded meekly. He then thrust a package of green hand towels into my hand, containing something warm. A safe distance away, I checked my package. There was a large eye with all the bits still
Warm?
connected. Warm.
Why?
Well, it presumably had been in a bull recently. I'm
right.
imagining.
Horrible.
I don't need to go into too many details, I don't think. Anyway, all the bits were still connected, like muscles and tubes and things like that. Now, the tale brings us to my late night working in the studio, crafting my eye to fit with the rest of my image, making the complete horror book cover. This was a complex task, well before the days of Photoshop.
There you go.
There you go.
There
See?
you go.
A task I revelled in. I could see the end result being an absolute winner. Minding my own business, studiously working away, suddenly the double doors burst open and the hairdressing students were back, invading our space and grabbing unsuspecting models. Mine was called Doris. My eyes met with my fellow drinking buddy student, and we instantly knew what I was going to do next as I had my hair cut yet again. I managed to grab the eye before being dragged off to get my hair styled. I was invited to sit before the mirror with my prize secreted in my clenched hand. My head was unceremoniously shoved into the sink in preparation to have the hair washed before cutting, all witnessed by a large matronly hairdressing tutor. Well, I chose my moment, with my head bowed over the sink, which was rapidly filling up with suds. I dropped the eye into the sink, leaving enough time for it to become covered with suds. I suddenly screamed in pain, clutching my closed eye. Matronly tutor came running over. "What's happening here, Doris?" she exclaimed. "She squeezed my head too hard!" I yelled. "I can't see!" I tried to sound genuine and stifle the laughter. Everyone screamed. I lifted my head, the suds parted, revealing the eye and its entrails. Doris's scream was piercing, and then everybody joined in. Then, because I couldn't take it any longer, I removed my hand, opened my eye, and beamed at the matron. And let's say she was not impressed. She reported my behaviour to my tutor and banned me from the hairdressing department, which I saw as a bit of a result, really. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there, but what is to follow really wasn't my fault. Hijinks over, I returned to the studio with wet, uncut hair, finished my work and left. I had to pass the hairdressing block on my way back to my digs. Work complete, I discarded the eye into the bin located outside the door. The following I didn't witness, but was informed about later by my department head. Apparently that night, it was Doris's turn to brush up all the hair from the floor and clear it away and generally clean up. She went to the bins with her shovel full of discarded hair and lifted the lid to dispose of said hair. On lifting the lid, she saw the eye, which, when exposed to light, apparently closed the iris down while she was watching.
Oh, what?
Apparently so. Does that actually happen?
Oh, my.
I think I was digging into my pot noodle in my digs 3 blocks away when I heard Doris's now familiar scream. After all these years, Father Simon, I seek forgiveness from Doris, who was scared out of her wits, but she did choose me. Fortunately, I progressed to becoming a fully fledged photographer in an industry I'm still enjoying. I rely now on my wife giving me the occasional trim in fear of entering a barber's and coming face to face with poor Doris. Yours in hope. Well, it's an interesting prank. Let's see what Sister Rebecca makes of this.
It reminds me of kind of medical students. They do that kind of thing,
It's
don't they?
exactly the kind of thing that they would do.
I think he missed a trick there. I think he should have waited until she was actually cutting his hair with some scissors and then accused her of poking his eye out with the scissors. But anyway,
But
it
under
was
the
equally...
cover of the suds
That's
and
true,
the water
that's
and
true.
the head
I do
down.
think that Doris had already come across this eye in the sink, so she should have known there was an eye hanging around there. And that once she saw it in the bin, even
think
if
it was
the
the fact
iris
that
did
I
that,
think-
but that's also bizarre, isn't it? Anyway, I think that Doris was being a bit overly
I suppose
sensitive.
if it had winked at
to the eye, if it had winked at her and maybe said something, that would have been quite scary.
Eyes don't talk.
Well, nor do they wink when they're
There you go.
when
yeah.
they're dead.
Boom, right back at you.
So I forgive you, Nick.
Very good. Brother Matthew.
I'm very much in Doris's corner on this. I mean, obviously the initial prank where the eye is in the soapy suds, you do think to yourself, really, you can get that from squeezing someone's head? Don't think so. But I would have been freaked out if I had been tipping her into a bin and it winked at me. Not winked at
wink.
the iris thing did. If it did that, I would have
And
been.
then it talked.
Yes, and then
it got
talked at me. And then ran across the room. No,
It was wearing clothes.
Okay, yeah, obviously. Okay, well, yeah, but if that iris thing is true, I would have been freaked out, and I would have. Yes, I'm very much in Doris's corner. I am definitely not forgiving for this one. And him saying, "Oh, it wasn't my fault, by the way. You left it in the bin, pal." So yes, not forgiven.
Okay. This is from Kieran. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's tale. Kieran says, Dear Father Simon and your esteemed collective, I beg forgiveness for a misjudged and hopelessly executed act of love from my teenage years. Now, before I elaborate on the deed for which forgiveness is sought, I need to explain how tone-deaf I was in the pursuit of love. College and Saturday work meant that I was surrounded by a wealth of beautiful and smart girls whose affections I regularly craved, but were seldom acquired. By the time that Louise entered my life by joining the book team in the shop where I worked, I had practically given up trying, and so had not noticed that for once here was someone actually interested in more than friendship. No, Father Simon, I thought nothing of her near daily visits, the lengthy handwritten letters falling on my doormat 3 times a week, nor the nightly phone conversations lasting several hours at a time. It was in fact my best friend Rick who had to point out, look, mate, this letter ends, I love you. So, it was written very large. Anyway, with that sudden realisation, months into our friendship, I realised that I needed to act. It was then that I discovered my chance had passed, and Louise's affections had drifted to another guy called Ben.
Not very surprising.
No, not really. No. Anyway, I suppose she just gave up. Mind you, she could have been just hang on in there. The best thing comes to people who wait and all that. Anyway, her birthday was coming up, says Kieran, and I knew that a grand show of affection was required to win back her heart, and I hatched a plan. I knew that to romantic types, trees were symbolic of love and life, so I decided I'd plant one in her front garden.
What?
Technically, it was her mum's front garden, but anyway. To add further flourish, I would attach lines of balloons to the top of the tree, maypole style, and anchor them in the lawn.
Oh.
I would work at night and needed an accomplice, and so Rick was enlisted. When the night itself arrived, the plan had extended to also attaching pairs of balloons to every lamppost between her house and work. Since work was the following day, she would drive past them all before coming to the shop and be wowed by the dedication, commitment, and my love for her. How could Stuart compete with this? Eh?
Yeah.
Rick arrived promptly at 10 p.m. Actually, that should...
Yeah, it wasn't Stuart, was it?
No, it was Ben. Just
Ben.
make-
Yeah.
We
On
changed-
the, on the bounce Ben, as I've written.
We changed his name.
Stuart.
How could Ben compete
Yeah.
with this? Is that clear now?
Yeah.
Rick arrived promptly at 10 p.m. All ready, mate? I asked. I'm a bit groggy, actually, Rick replied. Do we have to do this? He started to recall the day's events, which included, not insignificantly, having 4 wisdom teeth removed under general anaesthetic. So blowing up 500 balloons was not in the list of approved activity from his surgeon. So I started inflating them myself, parents asleep upstairs. By midnight, we were ready to leave and headed to her house. It was November, and it quickly became apparent that the ground was too hard to dig properly.
Really?
I managed about
Beautiful.
half the depth I needed before plonking the tree in its pot in the divot on the lawn. The lines of balloons I'd imagined were even harder to realise, so I sort of wrapped them around the tree, which then fell over in the breeze. Not wishing to be caught, we quickly moved on to the lampposts. I'd already paired the balloons, which had annoyingly self-knotted into a jumbled mess in the car. Nevertheless, I quickly developed a system of driving a few yards, hopping out, tying the ribbon, then on to the next. We could do perhaps 20 or 30 before returning home to replenish the car. I say we, but Rick was by now drifting in and out of consciousness at this point. By 3 a.m. it was done, and I took Rick back to mine, woke him up, and guided him to the spare room. Feeling excited, I cleaned my teeth and went to bed, only to find a devastating note on my bedroom floor. It said, Louise called. She's staying at Annie's tonight. Right. So without a thought, I woke Rick, returned to the living room to inflate more balloons and headed to Annie's house.
You're joking.
But without a plan this time. In the freezing moonlight and with sleep deprivation and adrenaline guiding me, her garden hedge looked like a Christmas tree, and I thought it would be great to populate it with balloons like baubles. I also thought her lawn was reminiscent of a ball pond, so I filled the hedge and lawn with balloons. It was then that the wind picked up, and I watched as 36 balloons leapt and pirouetted before whizzing off down the silent residential road and bursting in numerous unforeseen ways. The noise was alarming and even woke Rick, who muttered something about feeling sick. Totally defeated, it was time to go home. The next day, a hungover Louise eventually arrived. Apparently, her night had been disturbed by noises outside the house, which had woken up Ben, who'd then thrown up on her. Anyway, Annie was not impressed. I fished to see if she'd seen the lamppost decorations, but her vacant stare told me everything. Later, I took a diversion home to find every single one had burst. He'd gone into an awful lot of work for absolutely no result. So I have to seek forgiveness from Rick, who as a committed friend, needed to sleep, but whose help came to nothing. From Louise and Annie, whose night was disturbed and carpet soiled. And from Louise's mum, who'd woken up to a tree in her lawn, which had fallen over with balloons attached to it. I have to tell you that 18 years later, Louise and I are now happily married. Just not to each other. Yours in hopeful anticipation of absolution. Kieran, well, you have to give him absolutely full marks for effort, not, to be completely deflated by having gone to the wrong house because she'd gone to stay at Annie's, then to go back and do it all again. You have to give him 100%, I would have thought, but Kieran, I don't think she's going to get...
like your pun, your deflated pun.
Yes,
Very
well,
good.
I thought it was effortless.
I think Kieran comes across as a bit hapless and, perseverance, true, but I just think he went around things in a very strange way.
He'd have been a catch.
I think the things that he did with those balloons and the tree, it just sounds like that's the kind of thing you do as a prank to annoy somebody.
No,
and,
he was in love.
He was in love, yeah. I just think it backfired pretty badly. He should have realised first time round that Louise really loved him with all her love letters saying I love you at the end of them. And the fact that he didn't realise and then he did this, which backfired so badly, I think, I'm sorry, I can't forgive you.
She quickly got over him and moved on to someone else.
Quite right, too.
I reckon Kieran was well out of it myself. Novice Nige.
Well, I don't know, can we say Pillock here on air? I don't know, but we just have
Pillock's okay.
Yeah, that's okay, because without doubt, Kieran is that thick. What do you do? I wonder what you do for a living now, Kieran. I don't know, obviously not inflating balloons, but yes, not just Pickett, but all the letters and everything. Really, let's put it down to adolescence, and now you're a brilliant Don or something like that, but not... Forgive him, because you read Rick's life. He was obviously in dire need, just coming out of hospital. And good luck to On the Bounce Ben. I don't know what he's ended up with, but obviously not Louise.
Ben/Stuart.
Yeah,
Stuart,
as it turns out.
not forgiven. No, you.
I think this is very unfair. Anyway, let's see what Matthew makes of it.
I think, if we're honest, this is all a little weird. If I were Louisa's dad and I'd woken up to find my front garden had been dug up with a tree put there and then a load of burst balloons everywhere, I wouldn't really be thinking, ooh, someone's after my daughter's affections. I'd be thinking that someone was trying to get back at me for something, that there's some bizarre revenge plot had been involved. And also, what's Rick doing? What's Rick doing blowing up all these balloons when he's just had his wisdom tooth taken out? In fact, Rick's a bit of an enabler here, I think. I think actually it's Rick's. Rick should have turned round and said, Kieran, do you know what, mate? This is all a bit weird. So we need to stop blowing up these balloons and digging up people's gardens.
He was in pain.
What we need to do is sit down and think maybe there's a different way of gaining this woman's affections rather than leaving a tree.
So is it Rick's fault?
No, it's very much Rick's fault. Yeah, so I'm going to forgive, actually, because I think Kieran's coming in for a bad rap here. I'm going to say it's Rick's fault. Rick should have stepped in, and he didn't.
And there you have it. But who did you forgive? Let us know, but send your own, please. This is the address, confessions@bbc.co.uk. With more daring do's for you next week. Don't forget the Weekly Mayo is available now and every Thursday.